Good morning, everybody. My name is Emily and I'm here to talk to you about the New South Wales Colonial Secretary's correspondence. So today we are going to look at a few things: the role of the Colonial Secretaries in the New South Wales State Government, and then we're going to talk about the Colonial Secretary's papers. We tend to break them up into the earlier papers, 1788 to 1825, and then the later papers, which are 1826 to 1982. We're going to look at how to find things in the Colonial Secretary's papers. So we're going to talk about indexes, guides, finding aids, registers, all of those sorts of things. And on the way, I'm going to show you some examples of some of the sorts of things you can find in the correspondence. And so we do actually say the Colonial Secretary's papers are the family historian's friends. And I hope that by the end of this, you will agree with me. This next slide, which is taking a minute to show on your screens, is just a view of the Chief Secretary's building from the Botanical Gardens. And I was there just last week and you can still see that building standing. And this is where all the magic happened. We still have one of the relics of the Colonial Secretary's office, which is this cabinet here. So you can see where it's been constructed to store lots of different papers over time. So if you come to the reading room, or even if you look at our website, you'll see that we do talk about the Colonial Secretary's records quite a bit. Now, this is because in the 19th century, and especially before 1856, the Colonial Secretary's office was the channel of communications between the governor and other government officers and private settlers and convicts. So letters would come from all directions about all sorts of things to the Colonial Secretary before they would be hived off to possibly other departments to deal with that matter, or possibly for the Colonial Secretary to deal with an inquiry or a request and respond back to that person. And the sorts of things you see in the records include correspondence from convicts and settlers on a range of matters. So there's things like petitions for mitigation of sentence, requests for land, requests to bury family members in one of the Sydney burial grounds, particularly through the 1860s and 70s, where burial land was scarce. So people did have to apply to the Colonial Secretary to have permission to bury their family members. You might see notifications that a person was admitted to a mental hospital, a lunatic asylum as they were known at the time. There might be correspondence about operational matters within different government departments, so appointing staff members, looking at how much money was being spent, all of that kind of stuff might come through the Colonial Secretary's office. The Colonial Secretary also had a major role in relations with Aboriginal people through the 19th century, and so there's a wealth of correspondence throughout the 19th century relating to Aboriginal people. Now, on our website, some of you would probably be familiar with this, and actually, if you've registered for the webinar, you probably have seen our website before. So this is our homepage, records.nsw.gov.au. See this picture of the Central Railway Station up the top there. And we just have a few things that we generally say about using the website effectively. Always scroll down. Our pages tend to be quite long, so there can be more further down the page that you're not seeing at the top of the screen there. We have a lot of tags which you can use to navigate through the website. Do use our online indexes and the key name search. And if you look on the picture of Central Railway Station there, you'll see there's some quick links to the online indexes and key name search. Key name search searches all of our indexes at one time, but you can also just select to search one index at any one time as well. And then we've got the Research A to Z, which provides information on various research topics. So everything from probates, land, Colonial Secretary inquests, company records, all kinds of information about records in the collection, what we have, and what you can find in those records. So that's the Research A to Z, and you'll see also a link to that under quick links on the Central Railway Station icon there. Moving down the home page, you'll see there's some boxes with some popular areas of the website linked to them. I've circled here the link to the Colonial Secretary's pages, and what we've done is we've put all of the pages to do with the Colonial Secretary in this example together. So you can click on that Colonial Secretary box there and go straight to where all the resources about the Colonial Secretary's office and the records that we hold are all shown together. And on this next screen, that's what you see. So here we have links to the Colonial Secretary's Correspondence Guide, links to the index to letters relating to land, a link to the main series of letters received, 1826 to 1982, a link to the index of papers, 1788 to 1825, and the special bundles, and right down the very bottom there's a brief overview. So that can be quite interesting just to swat up on, again, why the Colonial Secretary's office was so important to the machinery of government in the New South Wales in the 19th century. So today, of course, we're looking at the Colonial Secretary's papers. We're going to start by talking about the period 1788 to 1825. This is what we call our core colonial collection of records. We do find that before 1810, there's a lot, proportionally less records surviving than later, and there'd be a few reasons for that. Certainly once Governor Macquarie came in 1810, records there was more of an emphasis on creating records and keeping those records, whereas earlier than that, I think the energies of the colony were more into survival and building and those sorts of things. We also had the Governor Bligh incident a couple of years beforehand, and we know records were destroyed at that time. But certainly what survives is a very valuable link to our past and provides a lot of valuable information, not only about what happened generally in the colony and the policies, procedures, the rules, the proclamations that people were subject to, but also individually what happened to the residents of the colony at the time. So the early papers are made up of letters received, including special bundles. There's also memorials and petitions. Now, memorials and petitions are what you need to look out for when you're doing research. These are the letters that private individuals would send in to request some kind of favour, whether it be a mitigation of sentence, a grant of land, a convict to be employed to them, and they might go into some background detail of who they are, how they've come to the colony, what they do in terms of occupation, why do they need this particular favour, and why they deserve this favour. So they're honest, industrious, sober of disposition, and very deserving of whatever it might be. And often the letters will be annotated with the result of that application, so whether it was recommended or declined. And we also have the copies of letters sent. So this tells us the other side of the story. So we've got the letters coming in to the Colonial Secretary's office, asking, telling, those sorts of things, and then the replies sent from the office back to the various people that have written to the Colonial Secretary. Now, the records 1788 to 1825 were microfilmed back in the 1980s, and they were indexed back in the 1980s as part of a bicentennial project. These days, the microfilm copies are not only available in our reading room, but also at 40 public libraries around New South Wales, our community access points, and other state libraries around Australia have also purchased copies of these papers over the years. More recently, the papers have also been published on the Ancestry website. Now, this is a subscriber website, but many public libraries provide free access to people wanting to use the records thereon. There is also, as I mentioned, the index to the Colonial Secretary's papers, which is available on our website, and we also offer it for sale. But as I said, you can see it for free on our website. Now, this next screen shows you the front page of the index to the Colonial Secretary's papers. It's mainly a name index, so if you know the name of the person that you're researching, it's very helpful to look up under that name. There are some listings under subjects, and that can sometimes be a useful way to find an introduction to the subject, but also the names of the people involved in the various matters. And you can see it's arranged alphabetically by the letters up the top there, and you just need to click on the letter of interest, and then you'll get taken to another screen, which will allow you to drill down till you get to a screen like this. So I've pointed out here as a subject, nurses and nursing, and you can see there's 3 letters listed under this subject. You get details of the date of that letter, then you'll see what that letter was about, and then right at the end of the line there, you see the reference to actually go and look up that piece of correspondence. So you get the real number, the item number, and then the page number. So when you're looking at the real, go to the real, whatever the number is, and then you need to look for the 4-stroke number or the SZ number, whatever that number is there. There might be 2 or 3 different records. That's like our library call number, if you like. So you look for a title page that shows that particular number, and then you can go looking for the page number within that item, and that should show you the exact piece of correspondence that you're looking for. Now, this screen is more just to demonstrate that it's quite a good name index as well. So I've picked out here James McAnulty. Every person where there was some kind of identifying information does have that information showing next to their name. So we've got James McAnulty, came out on the bearing in 1819, convict. Sometimes where it wasn't clear whether this was this James McAnulty or some other James McAnulty, they'll have a separate entry for those letters. And so if there's a couple of entries for the same name, the second one not being clear whether it's yours or not, you might want to go and check those as well. Now, in this particular example, I've picked on the petition for the ticket of leave. So it says here in 1822 he was a servant of Matthew Bacon, and he's requesting a ticket of leave. And you can see there it's got a little bit of information about his career as well. So by 1825 he's a servant of John Hull, and he's still looking for a ticket of leave in 1825. So if we just go forward to the next screen, we can see here the actual letter, which is James McAnulty's petition for his ticket of leave. It gives us his background information there. He's been in the service of the government since his arrival until May 1820. Then he was assigned to Mr. Matthew Bacon of York Street, with whom he is still in 1822, so he's been there for a couple of years. He feels that his conduct has been irreproachable since his arrival, and feels therefore he should obtain this indulgence of the ticket of leave. Now this I've photographed from the original volume having the letter, but generally you'd see it from the microfilm, or if you're on Ancestry, the digital copy of the microfilm. So it's quite nice to actually see that original document there as well. On this next screen here, I've just also picked out Patrick O'Hara, who in 1810, so this is a little bit earlier, he arrives in 1800, so he's quite an early convict, and in 1810 he's petitioning for the mitigation of his sentence. So again, I photographed the original letter here, and Patrick O'Hara's quite a bit older. He's 77 years old in 1810, so wow, he's quite old. And he was in the military, and so there's a background of his military service there and why he should now have a ticket of leave. And what he would do once he got it. So it's a very valuable letter, particularly if you would be, say, his descendant, I would think, or, you know, even if you're just looking at what was happening to those military, ex-military convicts or people who were convicts at the time. Now, moving on to the later correspondence, which is a little bit more complicated to research. So we're starting to look now at correspondence from 1826 and forward. The first thing I'd be thinking about is the Colonial Secretary's Correspondence Guide. This is on our website and you can get to it from that box on the home page where you clicked and you found all the Colonial Secretary's resources. The first thing to say is that it's not an index. So you can't look up somebody's name in this guide and get that letter reference like we found with the earlier papers. This guide is basically a list of the records that we have from the Colonial Secretary's office, not a list of the names of the people mentioned in the records. So it goes through all the different things we've got from 1788 to 1826, which are indexed in that earlier one. And then from 1826 on, it lists the records that we have. So it lists all the letters received, the letters sent, minutes and memoranda, and the other correspondence series that we have as well. So today particularly we're going to think about the main series of letters received. So this is where most of the letters coming into the office would have been filed. We'll think about the special bundles which were filed separately, and I'll talk about special bundles later. We've got the letters from individuals relating to land, which they filed separately from 1826 to 1856. And then, of course, how to find the things. So we've got the indexes and registers to the correspondence. And more recently, we're so lucky that we've had some people publish some indexes to various aspects of the Colonial Secretary's records. So we do have the original indexes and registers that they used back in the day, back in the Colonial Secretary's building to manage all the letters coming in and letters going out. And then in the 1990s and the early 2000s, one of our researchers, Joan Rees, started an index looking at convict letters in the Colonial Secretary's correspondence starting in 1826, and it kind of grew and grew and grew into more of an index to lots of people in the Colonial Secretary's papers, and that index now goes up to 1895. Just this year it's been published on CD, and the microfiche index was great and so helpful, but the CD, amazing. So the CD is available at many public libraries and of course in our reading room as well. And for those of you who love the Colonial Secretary's correspondence, we love the CD index as well. We also have Joan's done an index to letters received relating to convicts. So that's, I do beg your pardon, that should actually read letters sent relating to convicts, 1826 to 1856. Now that's on microfiche and it's an index to letters sent, not received, sent. So that's all the letters going out from the Colonial Secretary back to the people who are writing about convicts. Now, the way they filed the letters changed a bit over time after 1826. So 1826 to 1832, the letters were filed in number order. So every letter when it came into the office was given a number. Every year they'd start at number 1 and they'd just go up to however high they needed to for each year. And so the next year they'd start at number 1 again, and the year after that and the year after that. They continued to number the letters all the way through. However, between 1833 and 1849, for some reason, they decided it was a good idea to file the letters by subject rather than by number. So this is okay sometimes, but it can also make it quite difficult to work out if we're not sure of what the subject was. So if they're writing about a convict going to court, is it a convict letter? Is it a court letter? Could it be a miscellaneous person's letter if they've filed it by the person who's written the letter who wasn't the convict? So can do your head in, and we've got a couple of ways around that. And then from 1850 to 1982, thankfully, they've gone back to just filing the things in number order, which makes it a little bit easier to locate a particular letter. And then we've got the special bundles, which are filed separately from the main series, and I'll talk a bit more about those later. Now, looking for the in letters. So in letters, letters received, letters coming into the office. So you can do a few things if you're looking for letters coming into the office. You can go back and use the original indexes and registers created at the time. They do work, and it's amazing that still in 2018 we are using these things to find letters that were written over 200 years ago, over 150 years ago. The registers and indexes are available on microfilm in our reading room. We also, of course, hold the originals, but they don't come out very often as the microfilm tends to be just fine. And then we've also got the later published indexes, and we'll look at those as well. So these are also available in our reading room, and other organisations like the State Library of New South Wales and other places also have copies of the published indexes, and I think particularly the CD has been quite popular. Now, the main series of letters received, we're talking about 1826 to 1982. We do have an index, but basically what it really is a box list. So for each box, it will tell us the range of letters in that box and the year that those letters cover. It can be useful if you're searching in that 1833 to 1849 time period where they're filed by subject. So you can look up convicts, Aboriginals, Supreme Court, Surveyor General, and it will tell you what year we have those, what box numbers those letters are in, but it doesn't function as a name index for the people mentioned in the index. So it's useful as a box list and to find a box for a particular year. So the index looks a bit like this. You can just put a year in this from box here. If you knew you were looking for convicts and you were looking between 1833 to 49, you could put that in there. And all the churches had to notify the Colonial Secretary about people applying to get married through marriage bans, and they're all filed separately, which is why we've got this thing here for the church. So you've put your search term into the box there. You have a little search. In this example here, we've just put convicts into the title field. And what we come up with is 7 pages, yes, dear listener, 7 pages of records relating to convicts from the main series of letters received. And these would cover the years 1826 to 1828, as you can see here, right up to 1849, which is that year of the subject bundles. What we get over in the left-hand side is the item number, so this is the box number. Some of the records have been microfilmed, and the principle in our reading room is that if something's been microfilmed, then you view it on microfilm, and we would not generally issue the original unless there was a particular reason that we might have to. But generally we prefer to issue the microfilm so that the originals aren't handled and aren't damaged further by handling. The next column across is year, and so that just tells you the year that the records were created or filed. And then finally over here we've got the titles. So you can see these are all convicts, but for some years they've actually broken down whether it's to do with bank accounts, whether it's assignments, whether it's ticket of leave applications, whatever it might be. So you might have a specific interest and you could go straight to that particular bundle. If you're looking for someone who applied for a ticket of leave in 1833, hello, I could go straight to 4/2181.3 on reel 2195 and work my way through those applications to see if my particular one I'm looking for is on that reel. Good luck. The next thing I want to talk about are the indexes and the registers. Now these cover 1826 to 1906. A few things to just be aware of. An index is something that's arranged alphabetically. So like the index at the back of a book is arranged alphabetically. It's got the subject and a page number. So with these, we've got the person's name or the office the letter came from and the number of the letter. So the index will give you the number of the letter from the person that you're researching, alphabetical. Very good. The registers are arranged by number. So every year, as I said before, they start at number 1. So 1835, 35 would be the year, / number 1, first letter coming into the office for 1835. Might go up to 7,982, so that would be 35/7982. The registers give you information about the letters that came into the office. It would show you the date they received it or registered it, who the letter came from, where that writer lived, the date they sent it, what the letter was about, so the nature of the application, what the Colonial Secretary's office did with it, so did they refer it on to another government department, and what the result of that application was. So did they reply in detail? Did they refile that letter to another number? Did they decline? Did they approve? Whatever happened to the application. All of that information is shown in the register. So the registers themselves are quite useful. There might be times when you can't find the actual letter, but here in the register, you do get a summary of what the letter was about. You have that evidence that someone wrote that letter and then what the Colonial Secretary's office did in relation to that matter. So even without the letters, quite valuable. Now, the next screen here, when it comes through, this is an example of a page from an index from 1851. What I've picked on here is the page for police, for letters received between January and March 1851. You can see here we've got letters from police and then they're broken down by the various localities, Campbelltown, Carcoar, Cassilis, Cooma. Then down the bottom there, Dubbo, and there's a big blue arrow pointing against the last letter along that row there. Additional constables, it says, and 3176. So the letter number here is 1851 3176. And that's interesting too, just to note that in the first 3 months of 1851, they've received at least 3,000 letters coming into the office. So there's a lot of correspondence coming in all the time that they've got to manage. They've got to be able to find it. They've got to be able to file it. And they've got to know what they're doing with anything at any particular time. The next screen shows us the register for that 1851 3176. So up the very top of the screen there, you've got the column headings, very useful. And then going down the left-hand side of the page, we've got the numbers. So they just run in number order, 65, 66, 67, to where we get to our arrow to 3176. That's our letter that we're looking at. We can see going across that it's come from, the letter has come from the bench at Dubbo. It was sent on the 22nd of March and received on the 29th. And it's respecting the employment of additional constables. Going across the screen, we can see that it was answered on the 9th of April. And then under that, there's another letter number, 513469. So the practice in most government departments at the time was if a new letter on the same matter comes in, they picked up the old letter and filed it with the new letter. So the file number keeps changing. And so part of the trick with researching these records is to follow that trail of the changing file number till we get to the end of the trail. So that's called top numbering, where they change the number and they put the old letters with the newest letter that's come in. So you can see in the second column across papers, we've got 2326. So 2326 would have been an earlier letter that had come from Dubbo Bench about police in Dubbo. And that's been picked up and then filed with 3176. Which has then, those two letters have then gone and been filed with 3469. So what we need to do now is go to look up the entry for 3469 to find out what has happened to that letter. And sometimes this trail can go on and on and on. Luckily in this instance, no. But in this instance, we look up 3469, we can see 3176, so that's the letter we just looked at before, so that's been picked up and put with 3469. We can see this comes from the Auditor General, and it's to do with salaries and clothing allotments of the Department of Police at Dubbo. And in the last column here, we've got in detail 23rd of April. So they would have replied in detail on the 23rd of April. Looks like that's the close of that particular trail of letters. We haven't got another number to look up in the register, thank goodness. But if we did, we would then have to go to that letter in the register. And we'd have to keep going through the register until there's no letter in that last column. So now that we've got no letter number in that last column, we can go and look for 3469, 1851, 3469. The letters are filed in number order, so I should be able to look up my box list for 1851, see where 3469 fits into the range, and then check in the box to see if the letter is there. And yes, having prepared this one earlier, we knew the letter was there. So you can see here, this is just to give you an idea of the 3469 being on the top. So most of the letters are folded in half. So there's a back half, and then inside that would be the 3176 that you can see up the top of the screen, and the 2326, which was that first one mentioned. And they're all just slipped inside the latest letter coming in. Those earlier letters are called enclosures, so they're enclosed inside that later letter, and they're all filed together. So if we went to 3176 in that range, we wouldn't find 3176 there because it's been pulled out of there and filed now with 3469. So this is just a closer look at that 3176. Up the top of the letter here, you can see that it's got that number on it. You can see underneath that they've summarised the detail of the letter. So this is the letter originally coming in over here, and then we've got some annotations put on there later by the Colonial Secretary's office and possibly the Auditor General's office, and what was to happen about the matter and to happen about the letter. In this instance, I also was curious to see what had been sent from the Colonial Secretary's office back to Dubbo. So I've gone to look for the letters sent by the Colonial Secretary. So this one was kept in a book called Letters Sent to Magistrates Beyond the Settled Districts. And the Colonial Secretary's office was quite good at, particularly up through the 1830s, 40s, 50s, of keeping copies of the letters sent. So we can see here, this is where they've just kept a copy of what they wrote back to the police bench of magistrates out at Dubbo. You can see over here where the blue arrow is that we've got a reference to the letter it's replying to. So that's very good. We know what they're talking about. And then that can help us to trace letters coming in as well. And here just is a copy of a list from the website with the list of the letters sent. So you can see here NRS 990 at the top, letters to magistrates beyond the settled districts. These letters are concerned with things like Aboriginal aggression, protection, appointment of clerks, constables, other officials, courthouse, lockup, other buildings, licensing. So if that's the kind of thing you were interested in 1847 to 1855, you might look at the letters sent first. Each volume, they're arranged in books, in volumes. Each volume is indexed at the front, so you can go and then look up for Dubbo or wherever. And then when you're looking at the letters sent, if we just go back to that previous screen, you see here, you saw that we had the letters sent number there. So if you didn't know that number, you could have looked at the letters sent, find out that they've actually written about these things, seen that letter. Then you see the letter for the letters sent number there, and you could then get into the letters received that way as a possibility. So there's a couple of tricky things you could do there. And finally, this was the top letter here, that 3469, which shows what the end of the matter was. So again, they've had the summary up the top there. We've got the letter number, we've got the date that it was registered, and we've got the actual letter coming in. And then over on the left-hand side, what action was to be taken for that matter. So quite informative, and just using the tools that they had at the time, all those clerks sitting on their big desks writing in those books, we still have those books and we can use those to our own advantage to patiently locate the information. So one does need to be patient, and we do always have the caveat of no guarantee of success, but this is what you would need to do to see if you could undertake that research. Now, before we were talking about those years from 1832 to 1849, 33 to 49, where letters are arranged by subject. And we've created a skeleton register, which actually starts in 1826 and goes up to 1849 for those letters for that time period. And it just tells us our letter number and the box that the letter is in. So that can negate a lot of that tracing through the registers for that time period, which is wonderful. Doesn't always, because we've only just written box numbers in as we've discovered letters along the way. It's been an in-house finding aid that we've been working on for years and years and years and years and years. It was old when I started here at the office, and it's designed to help us locate individual letters. So there are still letters that we haven't located, and the skeleton registers are held in our reading room. So if the letter isn't listed in the skeleton register, or if it's after 1849, we suggest that you use the indexes and the registers to find the letters. This next screen is just an example of a skeleton register page from 1827. So you can see there's the left-hand side of the column there, which has the letter number starting at 4619 at the top. And then just that little bit across, it gives us the box numbers where we know. And where there's an X, that means that we don't know where that letter is. We haven't come across that letter. So there's even 1827, there's quite a few that we haven't come across, but there's a lot that we have. The particular letter I've pointed out here is 4691, and it tells us it's in box 4/9132 with another letter, 4766. So if I went to that box 4/1932, I'd be looking for 4766, and hopefully 4691 would be folded up with it as an enclosure. And over the screen here, we've got a copy of that letter 27/4691. And so this is actually a memorial from David Smith. He's requesting permission to marry. So he was a convict, came in as John Robinson on the Tottenham in 1818, got 7 years and got a certificate of freedom. He's a bachelor. And he now works as a master tailor. He has 4 free men that he employs, 6 government men, and he has an extensive trade. He wants to marry a lady called Mary Ann Delahunt. She came out on the Mariner, and she's a convict as well. and she's living in the service of someone at Bringelly. And so this was requesting permission to get married. Down the bottom there's Bowcombe and Cowper who are recommending this application, and I believe it was successful. Here's another letter, just an example. This is a constable who was found in a state of intoxication on the road between Campbelltown and Sydney. Oh dear, disrepute. So they recommended that he should be dismissed due to his issues there and after such conduct. Now, the published indexes do make life a lot easier if you're researching the Colonial Secretary's papers. So we've got the indexes that were published by Joan Rees. So there's the letters received relating to convicts and others, and as you go through time, it's more others. The index to letters sent relating to convicts, index to the female factory residents, and there's also the applications for the marriage bans. 1826 to 41, and the Genealogical Society of Queensland also did letters sent to the Sheriff, 1828 to 50. Just a quick look at how the index works on the CD. So in this example, we've got the search screen there. So you could search on the surname of the person or their first name. You could search on a ship. You could search on a mental hospital name or what the subject was, just in case. You could also search on the letter number or a box number if that was the information that you had. So it's quite versatile in that way. I'd imagine that if you're doing family history research or something, you're probably going to use it as a name search or maybe the ship more than anything else. So with my search on the surname Spearin, there was a few names that came up. I'm particularly interested in this Patrick Spearin at the end, who's on with the remarks Jane, and I can see there's a letter number 49278 and a box number 4/2844. Now turning over the page, this is actually this 49/278. That's that letter that's mentioned next to Patrick Spearin's name, and what it is a letter from the Principal Superintendent of Convicts to the Colonial Secretary recommending that people inside the enclosures be allowed to have their wives and families come out to New South Wales at the government's expense. So, oh, hello, that's, you know, all your Christmases come at once, I think, if you're researching a convict. So here on the next page, we've got the actual application, which was folded up and enclosed inside that first letter, 49278, and it tells us lots of details. So we get his wife's name, where she was living, where she was, the name of the child in this case, and then also the referees. So in this case, it's two reverends back from Ireland as well. And then we've got the list of the other couple of people who are also included in the same letter, also applying for their wives and children to come out. And then on the back of Patrick Spearin's letter, it says that he's eligible and recommended to be allowed to have his wife and child come out to New South Wales. And then we see the passenger list for the Anglia, and we see that Ellen and John did actually come out a year in 1850. So it took a while for it all to happen. I mean, Ireland's a long way away and all of that sort of stuff, but there she was. She came out and they reunited. So happy days. Another example might be this John Manuel comes out on Lagrange in 1846 with, again, letter number, box number, and then we see here what we've got is an application for a certificate of naturalisation. So this is the form that John Manuel had to fill in. It tells us where he was living, where he came from, when he came out, how old he is, what ship he came on, why he wants naturalisation. So mostly it's because they wanted to purchase land in the colony. He's signed with an X, which is also very lovely. And then there's a covering letter recommending that he be granted this naturalisation. So after that, you could go to the naturalisation index and discover that he was actually naturalised. Sometimes there's sadder stories in the Colonial Secretary's papers. Never underestimate a sad story in the state government archives. So this is for poor little Amy Webb, who was 5 years old, and they were wanting to put her into the benevolent asylum because there was no one to look after her. Her foster mother was in Darlinghurst Jail. She's 5, and so she was put into the benevolent asylum. Now, this wasn't run by the government, it was run by the Benevolent Society. The records of the Benevolent Society are held at the State Library, not the State Archives, and there is an index to the records from 1857 to 1900 for the Sydney Benevolent Asylum. And here we see just the page from the index showing that Amy Webb was actually admitted in April 1880 at the age of 5. And then you could go off to the State Library, or you could go through this website to order a copy of that record of her admission into the asylum in 1880. Happier stories, I suppose. Here we've got the Convict Marriage Bans Index, which is 1826 to 1841. It's a little bit probably strange to our eyes these days, but it's an annual index. So every year, all the convicts are listed alphabetically, and they're given a page number. So imagine this is a microfiche. You've looked up, you see Isabella Cragg's page 18. So I move along the microfiche to page 18 for 1829. Down the bottom, we've got the arrow showing Isabella Cragg's and John Black getting married, both convicts. They came out in their ships, ticket of leave and bond. So he had a ticket of leave, she's still a convict. And then right down the bottom there, you've got the marriage certificate numbers. So we do know that they got married at the end. Interestingly, up the top of this page, we've got a box number and a reel number. And in this box, copied onto this reel, we've got the church notifying the Colonial Secretary that these two convicts wanted to get married. Sometimes there would be a question about whether the person could get married. So if they were recorded as already having a wife in the UK, then possibly they couldn't because they would still be married, but they would investigate each case and work out whether the person was married or single. So the convict marriage bans really was a form that was filled in by the priest of the church, the vicar. This one here comes from St James's Church in Sydney, and this is the page for John Black or Black and Isabella Cragg's. Going across the page, you see where she's currently assigned to, what her character was, and then there might be annotations down the bottom, as in this instance here. So Black, we didn't know whether he was married or single at home, but Isabella Cragg's stated as single, but also had been in trouble previously for being found in bed with a man in a disorderly house in 1828, but rehabilitated, now wants to get married, got good conduct this year, and I think they were allowed to get married, as we saw from the marriage certificate numbers on the index. And sometimes if there was a question, you might actually get some letters sent from the person who employed the convict, or sometimes from family members stating that maybe the wife or husband had passed away and this person was now free to get married. So well worth a look if you've got a convict getting married between 1826 to 1841 while they're still a convict. So it doesn't work if they're free. Some sadder stories. So here we've got Catherine Nagel being admitted to Parramatta Mental Hospital in 1880. We've got paperwork to say where she came from and who admitted her. And also in the same letter, we have some background information about her. So how did she come to be insane? What's her background? How old is she? Is she married? Who's her husband? All of those sorts of things, all included. And you might also see this kind of material in the mental hospital records itself. But if there's a question about where they went to, when they were admitted into a mental hospital, the Colonial Secretary's correspondence can be quite useful to give you that information. And then some years later, there's a notice of death for Catherine Nagel in 1889. So it tells us what she passed away from and where she passed away. And so that kind of ties up her story there. And from there, you could again go back to the records from that mental hospital to see what has survived, and you might be able to research further information about her. We do have letters received relating to land for the years 1826 to 56. These were filed separately, and they're all letters to do with requests from individuals for land, so requesting grants or to lease land or to purchase land, received by the Colonial Secretary's office between 26 and 56. And it includes applications for land outside the limits of location between 1834 and 47. We've got these on microfilm in our reading room. They're also at the State Library of New South Wales on microfilm, and there's an online index to those. So the letters are just arranged alphabetically by the people whose land it was or who was applying. And the index is quite simple. You just look up the name of the person. It tells you the first date and the last date of the letters relating to land for that person, and then also where to find them. So you've got the item number and the real number shown there. So with our Roger Murphy, the first thing that we found in the bundle was a memorial, and this is some memorial. It goes on for 3 pages. It's talking about who he is, why he should have land, and what land he wants and what he wants to do with it. And then over the page, we've got the end of the letter with the signature of the person himself. So that's very exciting. And then on the right-hand side of the screen there is a later letter. So that earlier letter was 1827. In 1836, he's completed a form to ask for permission to purchase 100 acres of land. Again, he's signed down the bottom. He's completed that he's free. He arrived on the ship the Surrey from Ireland in 1827, I think, or 1817. It's hard to read that squiggle there. And there's quite a bit of correspondence from Roger Murphy. So not only did he purchase land, he leased land all over the place. And there's probably 20, 30 letters in that bundle about him and his land. So a lot of it will be related to the land, but you will also get this biographical detail as well, particularly when they're requesting or sending that memorial in. So well worth a look if you've got somebody in that time period. Now, we've got records from the Court of Claims. This was because land was such a mess to manage by the 1830s. There were people who'd been promised grants of land but weren't in possession of the titles of that land, and it was becoming impossible for the Supreme Court to recognise legal titles to land. So they established the Court of Claims to remedy that situation. There was an act in 1833, and then they continued after 1835 with a new act. Those records have been indexed, so you can search up the name of the person, and you can also search for the first possessor of that land, and the index will tell you where the land was. The memorials look a little bit like this. So over each one had its own number. It tells you where the land was, tells you the date of the memorial, it tells you and the previous history of who had also possessed that land. The Court of Claims would look into the matter, and then they would write a report. So in this instance, Sarah Hitchcock won her case. The commissioners found in favour of her, and she got to keep the land. And finally, just a little note on the special bundles. So this would be where a file was starting to get quite large on a particular subject. And so they'd extract that file from the main series and they'd file into what they called special bundles. And other government departments kept special bundles as well. The police, Treasury, Public Works, for example, all had special bundles. Premier's department as well in the 20th century. So we have 2 different groups of them, 1794 to 1825 and 1826 to 1982. They're all listed on our website by title. So you can go in and have a little read of the special titles that there are, but you can also search if you do a Control F on the website if you're looking for a particular keyword or something. And they're just divided up by time period because there's so many of them. It would be difficult to put them all into one page. Now this is an example of the listing from 1846 to 56. The first one up there is a claim by Mrs. Peter Brennan for an allotment of land at Sussex Street in Sydney. It gives us the box number. And just to show you a quick example of what you might find in this particular one, on the left-hand side of the screen, it was like a document and then some folded documents stored with it. Unfolding the folded documents, we've got a beautiful plan of that allotment, which you can see there, and there are a couple of other plans included in there as well. And then this is, next screen is just that first page, just so you can see it. So it was talking about the deed, who the owner actually was, and the outcome of that situation. And just another quick example before we wind up. This was the returns of leg irons, handcuffs and marching chains, 1840 to 46. Sadly, no names of people in the leg irons, handcuffs and marching chains, but it just goes through the various jails and things and how many they had issued, and they'd have to make these reports on a quarterly basis to the Colonial Secretary. So you can see it's like a pile of documents there. And then when you go in and have a look at some of the documents, so on the left-hand side there, we've got the police office at Parramatta, what they'd issued between October and December 1845. So quite a few handcuffs, but no leg irons, and some marching chains. And then on the left-hand side, there's another more kind of a summary for various different jails and things that they've put together, obviously from all of the individual returns, recording what had been issued for each of those, I can't think of the word, for each of those categories. So just a range of the sorts of things that the Colonial Secretary's office papers can give you. So just in closing, I'd just like to say that they are wonderful. It is certainly worth your while to persevere if you've got research that you're doing with the Colonial Secretary's office in that time period. We do encourage you to be brave. It's always worth the effort, I think. So thank you very much for your time and your attention.